My name is Madison Torres, I'm 28, and on what was supposed to be the best day of my life, my own family watched silently while my husband's mother literally took the microphone out of my maid of honor's hand. But here's the thing nobody expected, that wasn't even the real betrayal. It started months before the wedding. My parents, Rosa and David Torres, had been saving for my big day since I was a kid. They weren't rich. My dad worked construction. My mom was a nurse. Every dollar mattered. They'd promised me this wedding, our wedding, would celebrate our family, our culture, our history. They wanted to give me something they never had. Then I met Derek. Derek was everything I thought I wanted. Charming, ambitious, from what seemed like a put-together family. His parents, Catherine and Richard Westbrook, were wealthy. Old money. The kind of people who summered in the Hamptons and had opinions about which fork to use. When Derek proposed, I was floating. But Catherine? She had other plans. The first sign was subtle. Derek casually mentioned that his mom wanted to help with wedding planning. I thought, great, extra hands, right? Wrong. What started as suggestions became demands. She wanted a country club venue instead of the beautiful Spanish colonial mission my parents had booked. She wanted her florist, her caterer, her color scheme, cream and gold. Very timeless, very her. I remember the exact moment things shifted. We were at Derek's parents' house, going over the guest list. My abuela, my grandmother, had just passed away 3 months before. She'd been everything to me. I was naming a cocktail after her at the reception. I was telling Catherine about it, getting emotional, and she literally looked at Derek and said, "That's nice, but it might feel dated to some of your father's business associates." Dated. My grandmother's legacy was dated. Derek didn't say anything. He just looked away. My mom noticed. She always did. I'd catch her exchanging looks with my dad during planning meetings, this mixture of hurt and anger they tried to hide. But they kept quiet because they loved me and they wanted me to be happy. That silence killed me more than any argument could have. By the week of the wedding, Catherine had inserted herself into literally every decision. The ceremony processional? She changed it. The seating chart? Completely rearranged. She even had Derek's ex-girlfriend sit in the front row for continuity, she called it. My mom's face when she saw that name card is something I'll never forget. Then came the moment that made me realize everything was about to explode. The day before the wedding, I overheard Catherine on the phone with the venue coordinator. She was giving new instructions that completely removed my parents from their roles in the ceremony. My dad was supposed to walk me down the aisle. Catherine wanted the aisle to be escorted by the Westbrook family instead. My mom was meant to give the first family toast. Catherine had already written a speech emphasizing Derek's side of the family. I confronted Derek that night. I was furious. And you know what he said? "Mom's just excited. She means well. Can't we just let her have this? Let her have my wedding?" That's when I knew I had a choice to make. I could either disappear into the Westbrook family narrative, or I could take back what was mine. But I had no idea what I was actually about to discover, something that would make the wedding day drama look like nothing. The night before my wedding, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying that phone conversation I'd overheard, Catherine systematically erasing my family from every meaningful moment. Around 2 a.m., I did something I'm not proud of. I grabbed Derek's laptop from the kitchen counter. I just wanted to see the email chain. I just wanted proof that I wasn't overreacting. What I found instead shattered everything. There was an entire folder labeled Wedding Strategy, and I mean strategy, like they were planning a corporate merger, not a marriage. Inside were dozens of emails between Catherine, Richard, and Derek dating back 6 months. But the subject line of one email made my stomach drop. "Keep the Torres family contained. Damage control plan." Damage control. For my parents. I clicked. My hands were shaking. The emails were brutal. Catherine had written, "Rosa and David are sweet, but they don't understand our world." We need to make sure they feel included enough to not cause a scene, but not so included that they influence the aesthetic or narrative of this event. The last thing we need is cultural elements that might confuse our guests. Cultural elements. She meant my family, my heritage. But then it got worse. Richard had added a note. Catherine's right. I've done some digging. David's construction company had some financial issues 5 years ago. Nothing criminal, but leverage if needed. We want Madison happy, but we also need her to understand where her loyalty needs to be going forward. Leverage. They were planning to use my father's past struggles as leverage. I kept scrolling, feeling sick. There were notes about keeping my mom away from the reception planning because she was too emotional. Notes about why Derek's ex should be invited, to remind Madison that Derek has options, keep her grounded. Strategy upon strategy, all designed to make my family feel small. And Derek? He'd replied to almost every email with variations of whatever mom thinks is best, or let's just keep the peace. The man I was marrying in 12 hours had been strategizing with his parents on how to sideline mine. I sat there on that kitchen floor at 2 a.m., reading emails about my own manipulation, and something inside me broke. Not the kind of break where you cry, the kind where you go completely still and quiet, and you realize you're about to do something you can't take back. I heard footsteps. Derek emerged from the bedroom, confused. Maddie? What are you doing? Why are you on my laptop? I looked up at him. Really looked at him. And I asked one simple question. Did you know your parents were planning to use your dad's dirt on my father to keep my family controlled? His face went pale. Not shocked pale. Like he'd been caught, not betrayed. That's not what that was, he stammered. Mom just talks. She doesn't actually. Derek. Yes or no? Did you know? He looked away. That's all the answer I needed. I stood up. My legs felt numb. Part of me wanted to call off the wedding right then, but another part, the part that's always been strategic, even when I didn't realize it, knew something else. I knew that if I canceled now, they'd control the narrative. Catherine would tell everyone I got cold feet. My family would be humiliated. The Westbrooks would walk away unscathed, victorious even. But if I went through with the wedding, if I played along, at least for one day, I could make sure my family got what they deserved. I could take back what Catherine had tried to steal. We're still getting married, I told Derek quietly. But understand something, I know exactly who you are now. And I'm going to make sure your family knows I know. He tried to grab my hand. Maddie, please. We can fix this. I'll talk to them. No, I cut him off. You won't say anything to anyone. Not yet. Because tomorrow, at our wedding, my family is going to be honored the way they should have been all along. I went back to the bedroom and didn't sleep. I spent those final hours before my wedding planning something Catherine Westbrook never saw coming. And when I walked into that venue the next morning, I was no longer a bride worried about her special day. I was a woman with a mission. The ceremony was flawless, at least on the surface. I walked down that aisle in my grandmother's lace veil, the one my abuela had worn 40 years ago in Mexico City. Catherine's jaw clenched when she saw it. I smiled. Derek looked nervous the entire time, but I was calm. Eerily calm. The vows were beautiful lies. He promised to honor my family. I promised to stand by him. We kissed, and 300 guests applauded. The Westbrooks sat in the front row, already mentally calculating how the evening would play out. Catherine had the reception timeline memorized. She'd rewritten it herself. Dinner was served. The bouquet toss happened early, before the toasts, because Catherine wanted to control the emotional arc of the night. She'd strategically positioned herself near the event coordinator, constantly whispering adjustments. My parents sat at a table near the back, as far from the head table as possible. That wasn't an accident. Then came the toasts. Catherine had arranged for Richard to go first, a long, tedious speech about Derek's childhood achievements and the Westbrook family legacy. Then came Derek's best man, who spent 15 minutes talking about Derek's growth and how lucky he was to upgrade his life by marrying into stability. The implication was clear. I was the upgrade. My family was the before picture. My mom's hands were shaking as she held her water glass. That's when I made my move. While Catherine was distracted talking to a server about dessert timing, I signaled to my dad. He knew exactly what that meant. We'd planned this at 4 a.m. He stood up and walked to the DJ booth. He didn't ask permission. He didn't hesitate. The current song cut out. The room went quiet. My dad took the microphone and Catherine's head snapped toward him like she'd been physically struck. I watched her face cycle through shock, anger, and then this cold calculation, like she was already planning how to spin this as charming. Buenos noches, my dad said, his voice steady. My name is David Torres. I'm Madison's father. And I have a few things I need to say. He looked directly at Derek and Catherine. 28 years ago, my wife Rosa and I brought our daughter into this world. We made her a promise that we would always be her foundation, that we would work every day to give her opportunities we never had, that when she found someone to love, we would welcome them into our family, not as an upgrade, but as a brother. Catherine stood up. Excuse me, this isn't. Sit down, my dad said. Not aggressive, just firm. The room went completely silent. I know what you think of us, he continued, looking at Catherine and Richard. I know you see construction workers and nurses and think that's not good enough. I know you've been planning all week how to make my family invisible at my daughter's wedding. I know because my daughter showed me your emails. The room gasped. I watched Catherine's face drain of color. But here's what you don't understand, my dad went on. This girl, he looked at me, his eyes wet. She didn't need your money or your connections or your country club. She needed to know that her family sees her, that we're proud of her, that we're not ashamed to be here. He raised his glass. So I'm going to do what Catherine planned to do all night. I'm going to tell you who Madison really is. She's the girl who learned Spanish from her abuela so she could talk to her when she was sick. She's the woman who paid for her own college education while working night shifts at a hospital, just like her mother. She's someone who loves deeply and forgives easily, maybe too easily. He paused, and his voice got quieter. And if Derek, you're smart enough to see that, then welcome to our family. But if you're not, if you're going to let your mother treat my wife like she's beneath you, then you need to know right now that my daughter has options too. He sat down. The room erupted, not in applause and chaos. Catherine was standing, her face purple with rage. Richard was trying to pull her back into her seat. Derek looked like he might throw up. And my mom? My mom was crying, but she was also smiling, the kind of smile that said she'd just watched her daughter take back her power. But then Catherine did something that changed everything. She grabbed the microphone from the DJ booth herself, and what she said next would be the thing that destroyed her completely. Catherine's hands were shaking as she gripped that microphone. Her face was blotchy, her composure completely shattered. Richard was pulling at her arm, hissing something I couldn't hear, but she shrugged him off. She was beyond strategy now. She was in pure damage control mode, and she was about to make the worst decision of her life. I need to say something, she announced, her voice sharp and desperate. The room fell silent again, everyone sensing that we were about to witness something ugly. David, what you just said is completely unfair. You don't understand the position we've been in. She turned to face the crowd, and I realized she was trying to reframe this as a misunderstanding. We have a responsibility to protect our family's reputation. Madison is a wonderful girl, but she comes from a very different world than we do. My mom stood up. Different world? Catherine, my daughter is a registered nurse. She speaks 3 languages. She's more educated than. Please, Catherine cut her off, holding up a hand like my mom was an interruption. Let me finish. That's when Derek finally moved. He stood up and walked toward his mother. Mom, stop. Just stop. But Catherine was already committed. She turned back to the microphone, and her voice took on this almost manic quality, like she was confessing something she'd been holding in for months. "The emails your father mentioned?" "Yes, we were careful about how we approached this wedding. But that's because we needed to protect Derek." "Do you have any idea what kind of pressure he's under? The expectations?" "His father's business associates, his future career prospects. We couldn't have this wedding turn into some kind of cultural showcase that would embarrass him professionally." The room was dead silent. I could feel 300 pairs of eyes watching to see how I'd react. And honestly, Catherine continued, and I could see Richard's jaw clenching as he realized where she was going. "The financial situation with David's company. Yes, we looked into it. We had to. We do our due diligence on anyone who marries into our family. It's not personal, it's practical." My dad stood up. My mom grabbed his arm, but he gently pulled away. He wasn't angry, he was something worse. He was disappointed. But then Catherine said something that shifted everything. "And before anyone judges me for this, understand that I've spent my entire life building something. I've sacrificed. I've made hard choices. I've kept secrets that would destroy this family if they came out. So forgive me if I wanted to make sure my son wasn't dragged down by what?" I heard myself say. I stood up and the room's attention swung toward me. "By us? Say it, Catherine. Say what you actually think." She looked at me, and for just a second, I saw something flicker across her face. Fear. Not of me, of what she'd almost revealed. "That's not what I meant," she said, but her voice had lost its edge. "Then what did you mean?" I pressed. "You said you've kept secrets that would destroy this family." "What secrets, Catherine?" Richard stood up abruptly, his face completely white. "Catherine, we're leaving." Now, but Derek wasn't moving. He was staring at his mother like he'd never seen her before. "What secrets, Mom?" Catherine's hand dropped from the microphone. For a moment, she looked small, genuinely small, not just diminished by confrontation. She looked like someone whose entire constructed reality was cracking. "Nothing," she whispered. I misspoke. "You didn't," Derek said quietly. "I can see it on your face. There's something you've been hiding from me." The tension in the room was suffocating. Catherine looked at Richard, then at Derek, then at me. And in that moment, I realized something crucial. Catherine's fear wasn't about the wedding or my family or reputation management. It was about something else entirely. Richard grabbed Catherine's arm, not gently. "We're done here." They walked out. The guests watched them leave in absolute silence. It was the kind of exit that doesn't leave room for interpretation. It wasn't a dramatic departure, it was a retreat. Derek stood there, watching his parents leave, and then he looked at me. "Did you plan this?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He could see it in my expression. "Madison, what did you do?" "I just told the truth," I said. "Your mother did the rest." But here's the thing nobody in that room understood yet. I hadn't actually done anything except ask one question. Catherine's fear about those secrets wasn't something I had manufactured. It was real. And now Derek was going to spend the next 72 hours trying to figure out what his mother had been hiding. And when he finally found out, it would explain everything about why his parents had really wanted to control this wedding in the first place. Derek didn't sleep that night. Neither did I, but for completely different reasons. I lay in our honeymoon suite at the hotel. Yes, we stayed at a hotel instead of going to Cancun, because the wedding had imploded, and I could hear him pacing in the living room, his phone pressed to his ear. He was calling his father. Hanging up. Calling back. The pattern repeated for hours. Around 4 a.m., he finally came to bed, and I could feel the tension radiating off him. He didn't try to touch me. He just lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling. "My dad won't tell me," he said finally. "He keeps saying it's not his place, that I need to talk to Mom. But Mom won't answer her phone." I didn't respond. I was waiting for him to ask me directly. "Did you know?" he asked. "Before tonight, did you know what she was hiding?" "No," I said, and it was true. I'd suspected Catherine had something to hide, people that controlling always do, but I didn't know what. But I knew she was terrified of something coming out. He was quiet for a long time. Then, I'm going to go see them. Tomorrow. Okay, I said. He left at 9 a.m., still in his wedding clothes from the night before, looking absolutely wrecked. I stayed at the hotel, ordered room service, and waited. He was gone for 6 hours. When he came back, he looked like someone had aged him 10 years overnight. He sat on the edge of the bed, not next to me, but at the foot, like he couldn't quite commit to being close to me, and he told me everything. Catherine wasn't Catherine's real name. Well, Catherine was her real name now legally. But 42 years ago, she was someone else entirely. She was Catherine Mendez. My stomach dropped. Her parents were immigrants from Puerto Rico, Derek said, his voice hollow. She grew up in the Bronx. Her father was a janitor. Her mother was a domestic worker. When she was 19, she met Richard at college. He was from old money, Connecticut aristocracy, all of it. And she made a decision. He paused, and I could see him struggling with what to say next. She completely erased her past. Changed her name. Told Richard her parents were dead. Told everyone she grew up in Connecticut in a wealthy family. She created an entire fictional history, and she's been maintaining it for over 20 years. I sat up. Are you serious? Her parents tried to contact her when she got engaged, Derek continued. Her mother sent her a letter. Catherine returned it unopened. When her father died, my grandfather, she didn't go to the funeral. She didn't even tell Richard he died. She just pretended like that part of her life never existed. The irony was so sharp I could barely breathe. Catherine had spent the entire wedding planning process trying to erase my family, to make them seem small and insignificant, while she herself had erased her entire origin story. She'd built an empire of lies specifically because she was ashamed of where she came from. How did your mom react when your dad finally told you? I asked. She's devastated, Derek said. Not because she's ashamed, she's devastated because she realized that I know. She realized the narrative she'd spent her whole life constructing just collapsed. And she realized, he looked at me, that your family probably has more integrity than she does. I didn't say anything. I was processing too much. There's more, Derek said quietly. My dad told me that when my mom found out about my engagement to you, when she realized your last name was Torres, she actually panicked. She thought maybe you were related to her family, like her mother's maiden name was Torres. She spent weeks having her assistant research your family history. To see if we were related? I asked, horrified. No, Derek said. To make sure we weren't. Because if there was any chance that you were connected to her past, she was ready to call off the wedding. She didn't care if it destroyed me. She only cared about protecting the lie she'd been living. I felt something shift inside me. The anger I'd felt toward Catherine during the wedding wasn't even close to the magnitude of what I was feeling now. But it wasn't rage, it was something colder. Clarity. Derek, your mom spent this entire wedding planning process trying to erase my family because she was afraid that my family's existence would somehow expose her. She was projecting her own shame onto us. He nodded slowly. I know. And she's been living this lie for 42 years. Her own parents, your grandparents, she treated them like they were nothing. I know, he said again, and his voice broke. My grandmother passed away 5 years ago. My grandfather died 10 years ago. Neither of them ever knew their daughter became successful. They both died thinking she'd forgotten them. That's when it hit me. The cruelty of it. The absolute, devastating cruelty. But then Derek said something that made me realize this story was about to get even more complicated than I'd anticipated. There's something else, Derek said, and I could see him steeling himself. Something my dad found out when he was going through old documents trying to figure out how to fix this mess with my mom. He pulled out his phone and showed me an email chain between his parents from 3 years ago. The subject line read, Elena's estate, final decision. Elena. Catherine's mother. My grandmother had a will, Derek explained. She made it years before she died, back when Catherine was still in contact with her, before Catherine completely cut her off. In the will, Elena left everything to Catherine. Not a small amount, Madison. We're talking about a property in Puerto Rico worth around $800,000, plus another $200,000 in savings. I felt my chest tighten. Catherine inherited $1 million from her mother? Yes. But here's the thing, Catherine never claimed it. The money and the property sat in probate for years because Catherine refused to come forward. My dad found the paperwork. Catherine's lawyer actually reached out to Catherine after Elena died, telling her about the inheritance, and Catherine explicitly told them to redistribute it to charities. Why would she do that? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Because claiming it would mean admitting who she really was. It would mean acknowledging her mother, her past, everything she'd spent her life denying. And she couldn't do it. She literally threw away $1 million rather than face her own history. I sat there, completely stunned. Catherine had had the chance to honor her mother's memory, to do something meaningful with that money, and instead she'd chosen erasure. Again. My dad said my mom cried when he told her what she'd done. Like, actually broke down crying because she finally understood the magnitude of what she'd sacrificed for her lie. She'd rejected her family, erased her identity, and in the process, she'd also rejected their love and their legacy. Derek stood up and walked to the window. The city was glowing below us, this whole beautiful, complicated world full of people with secrets and shame and carefully constructed identities. I've been thinking about something, he said, still looking out at the city. About what your dad said last night. About loyalty. About what it means to be part of a family. Derek. I need to tell you something about us, he interrupted. About me. I've spent my entire life trying to be what my parents wanted me to be. I went to the right schools, joined the right clubs, dated the right people. And I let them treat people, your family, like they were beneath us, because I was too weak to stand up to them. He turned to face me, and his eyes were red. But watching your dad last night, watching him stand up for your mom, watching him refuse to be diminished, I realized I've never done that. I've never stood up for anything that mattered. I just went along. So what are you saying? I asked carefully. I'm saying I need to make this right. With your family, with my family, with myself. And I don't know if that means staying married to you, because honestly, I'm not sure if you married me or if you married the idea of taking down my mother. The words hung between us like a knife. He was right. And we both knew it. I never said I married you for love, I said quietly. I said I married you to take back my wedding day. To make sure my family was honored. And that's exactly what I did. Derek flinched. So everything after the vows, was that real? I didn't answer immediately. Because the truth was complicated. The anger had been real. The betrayal had been real. But somewhere between reading those emails and standing at the altar, something else had happened too. I'd seen Derek struggle with his mother. I'd seen him realize that he'd been complicit in her cruelty. And I'd felt something. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe the possibility of it. I don't know, I finally said. And I think that's the honest answer you deserve. Derek nodded slowly. My mom wants to reach out to your family. To apologize, to try to make things right. My dad thinks it's a bad idea. He thinks it'll just stir everything up again. But my mom says she can't move forward without trying. What do you think? I asked. I think my mom has spent 42 years running from the truth, Derek said. And I think it's time she finally stopped. But neither of us realized that Catherine's apology would reveal something none of us had anticipated, something that would change everything we thought we knew about my own family. Catherine called my mom 3 days later. I wasn't there. Derek insisted on giving them space, but my mom called me immediately after, her voice shaky and strange in a way I'd never heard before. Madison, you need to come home. Now. When I got to my parents' house, I found Catherine sitting at our kitchen table. Not the formal dining room. The kitchen. The real place where family happens. She looked smaller than she had at the wedding, diminished, stripped of her armor of superiority. My mom was standing by the sink, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "What's going on?" I asked, looking between them. My mom took a breath. Catherine came to apologize. And while she was here, she told us something. About her mother. About Elena. Catherine's eyes were red and swollen. She looked like she'd been crying for days. "I showed your mother photographs," Catherine said quietly. "Of my parents. Of my childhood. Things I've never shown anyone except Richard." She pulled out a manila envelope and slid it across the table. Inside were old photographs, faded, worn at the edges. A young woman in a wedding dress, radiant. A man in a janitor's uniform, standing proud. A little girl in her mother's arms. That little girl was Catherine. "Your mother recognized someone in these pictures," Catherine continued, and her voice was barely a whisper. My mom looked at me, and I could see she was struggling with something enormous. "Madison, do you remember when you were about 8 years old, and I took you to that community center in the Bronx for a summer program? You were there for 3 weeks." I did remember. Vaguely. It was one of those childhood memories that didn't seem significant at the time. There was a woman who worked there. She used to help us with the kids. She was so kind to you. Do you remember her name? I shook my head. I was 8. I remembered the place, but not the people. "Her name was Elena," my mom said softly. "Elena Mendez." The room started to spin. When Catherine showed me these pictures, I recognized Elena immediately. And I showed Catherine a photograph I've kept all these years. A photo from that summer. "Do you want to know who was in it?" I couldn't speak. I could already see where this was going. My mom pulled out an old Polaroid from a drawer she'd apparently had ready. In it, I was standing between 2 women, my mom and a beautiful older woman with kind eyes. The woman was Elena, Catherine's mother, my grandmother's friend or something. "Your abuela, my mother-in-law, and Elena were best friends," my mom said. "They met in the 70s, when both of their families were new to New York. They stayed close for decades. Elena knew you as a baby. She loved you." "Why are you telling me this?" I whispered. "Because," Catherine said, her voice breaking, "Elena talked about you constantly. After your family moved away, after we moved to Connecticut, Elena would ask about you. She'd ask your mother for updates. She wanted to know everything about you. And my mother. I found letters. Letters Elena wrote to me, trying to reach me, telling me about you, trying to bridge the gap between the life I'd chosen and the life I'd left behind." I sat down hard in one of the kitchen chairs. "Elena never blamed you for abandoning her," my mom said quietly. "She understood that you wanted a different life. But she loved you anyway. And when she found out you'd married Richard, when she realized you were successful and happy, she was proud of you. She just wanted you to know that she was proud." Catherine was openly sobbing now. "I threw away her letters," Catherine said. "I didn't read them. I couldn't face them." My mom's expression softened slightly. "But I kept copies. Elena gave me copies in case you ever came looking for them. She said, if Catherine ever comes back, I want her to know I never stopped loving her." The weight of that statement crushed me. Elena had spent years maintaining a connection to a daughter who wanted nothing to do with her, through the only channel available, a friendship with my grandmother. She'd loved Catherine from a distance, through us. And Catherine had been so busy running from her past that she'd missed it entirely. "Elena used to babysit you sometimes," my mom continued, looking at me. "When you were a baby, your abuela would ask her to come stay with us, and Elena would come, and she'd hold you for hours. She'd tell your abuela that you had her eyes, that you were going to do great things." I felt tears streaming down my face. When Elena died, my mom said, I went to her funeral. I sat in the back and I listened to people talk about her. And I thought about how she'd spent her entire life loving people who couldn't quite love her back the way she deserved. Her own daughter wouldn't even acknowledge her. But she never stopped trying. Catherine looked up at me with this desperate, broken expression. I didn't know. I didn't know Elena had tried to stay connected. I didn't know she'd been part of your family. I didn't. You didn't want to know, I said, and the words came out cold. You didn't want to know because it would have complicated your narrative. It would have meant admitting that your mother was worth something. That your past was worth something. You're right, Catherine whispered. You're absolutely right. But then my mom said something that would force me to confront my own complicity in all of this, and it would change everything I thought I understood about family loyalty and revenge. My mom looked directly at me, and I could see something shift in her expression. It wasn't anger exactly, but it was firm. It was the look she gave me when I was doing something wrong and she needed me to face it. Madison, I need to say something, and I need you to really hear me. I felt my stomach clench. I knew what was coming. What you did at the wedding, making Catherine confess, exposing her secrets in front of 300 people. You did that for revenge. Not for me. Not for your father. For revenge. She deserved it, I said, but my voice sounded small. Did she? My mom asked. Or did she just deserve to be held accountable? Catherine sat there silently, letting this conversation happen. She understood she didn't get to speak right now. Your father and I were hurt, my mom continued. We were humiliated by the way we were treated. But Madison, we would never have wanted you to humiliate Catherine the way you did. Not because she didn't hurt us, but because humiliation doesn't heal anything. It just creates more pain. She was planning to use Dad's past against him, I said. She was going to leverage his struggles. And she was wrong, my mom interrupted. Absolutely wrong. But two wrongs don't make a right, Mija. You know that. I felt something break inside me. Because she was right. I justified everything I'd done as standing up for my family, but the truth was uglier than that. I'd enjoyed Catherine's fear. I'd enjoyed watching her lose control. I'd enjoyed the power of knowing something she desperately wanted to hide. I wasn't standing up for my family. I was being cruel. What your mother is trying to tell you, Catherine said quietly, speaking for the first time in several minutes, is that I deserve consequences. But I don't deserve cruelty. And you gave me cruelty. You gave my family cruelty first, I shot back, but even as I said it, I could feel the argument crumbling. I did, Catherine acknowledged. And I'm deeply sorry for that. But Madison, shame doesn't change people. Only love does. Only understanding does. I stood up abruptly. I couldn't sit in that kitchen anymore. Couldn't breathe in that space where everything I'd been proud of was being dismantled. So, what? I'm just supposed to forgive you. We're all supposed to be one big happy family now. No, my mom said. But you're supposed to be honest about your motivations. You're supposed to admit that what you did wasn't about protecting us, it was about punishing her. And there's a difference. The silence that followed was suffocating. Over the next few weeks, things unfolded in ways I never anticipated. Catherine did reach out to her remaining family, a cousin on her mother's side that she'd never known existed. She started the process of claiming her mother's inheritance, with the intention of using it to establish a scholarship fund in Elena's name. For children from immigrant families pursuing nursing or education careers. Derek and I went to couples counseling. Not because we were trying to save the marriage, we were both honest that the foundation had been built on anger and manipulation, not love. But because we owed it to each other to understand what we'd done, why we'd done it, and what we needed to heal. I learned that Derek wasn't a weak man who'd let his mother control him. He was a man who'd been conditioned to seek approval from someone who could never give it unconditionally. That wasn't an excuse for his behavior, but it was an explanation. And understanding the difference changed how I saw him. My parents and Catherine developed an unlikely friendship. Catherine would visit, and my mom would teach her to make ropa vieja the way Elena used to make it. They'd sit in that same kitchen where everything had exploded, and Catherine would listen to stories about her mother, Stories my mom had been saving for years, waiting for Catherine to be ready to hear them. As for Derek and me, we divorced. Not dramatically. Not with lawyers tearing each other apart. We simply acknowledged that we'd married for the wrong reasons, and staying together would only perpetuate the damage. We signed the papers on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, and we both cried, not for the marriage we were losing, but for the people we'd hurt in the process of protecting ourselves. A year after the wedding, Catherine called me. She was going to Puerto Rico for the first time since she was 8 years old. She was going to visit her mother's grave. She was going to see the property Elena had left her. She wanted to know if I'd come with her. I almost said no. But then I thought about Elena, spending her entire life loving people from a distance, leaving letters unread, maintaining a connection through my mother, just hoping that one day, the people she loved would be ready to love her back. I said yes. Standing at Elena's grave, reading her name carved into that stone, I finally understood something that had eluded me during all my planning and revenge and vindication. Real power isn't about making someone confess their secrets in front of an audience. Real power is knowing your own story so completely that other people's shame doesn't have to become your shame too. Catherine placed flowers on her mother's grave, and she wept. Not the dramatic tears of someone performing emotion for an audience. Real tears. The kind that come from a place so deep inside you that you can't control them. "I'm sorry," she whispered to that stone. "I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to love you while you were here." I put my hand on her shoulder. Not in forgiveness exactly, but in acknowledgement that we were both women trying to figure out how to live after betrayal and shame and the lies we tell ourselves to survive. When we got back to New York, my mom was waiting with my dad. The four of us sat around that kitchen table, the same table where everything had imploded, and my mom made Elena's ropa vieja recipe. The one Catherine's mother had taught her decades ago. The one that carried a legacy of love across generations. And as we ate, Catherine told stories about Elena that my mom had shared with her. Stories about a woman who loved her daughter so fiercely that she loved her even when that daughter didn't want to be loved. That she found ways to stay connected. That she left a legacy of kindness that survived even abandonment. I realized then that the real plot twist wasn't Catherine's secret. It was mine. I wanted revenge because I thought it would restore my power. But the power I'd been searching for was already inside me, in my family's resilience, in my mother's grace, in my father's dignity. I didn't need to take anything from Catherine. I just needed to recognize what I already had. My wedding day had been hijacked. That was real. That was wrong. But my response to it had also been a choice. And sometimes, the bravest choice isn't the one that makes the loudest noise. It's the one that chooses understanding over cruelty, accountability over humiliation, love over revenge. That's the story I carry with me now. Not the story of the bride who grabbed the microphone and exposed a lie, but the story of the woman who learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is choose grace. Even when grace feels impossible. Even when it would be so much easier to hold on to the anger. Even when revenge is sitting right there, waiting to be taken. Because in the end, the people we hurt most aren't the ones who wronged us. They're the versions of ourselves we sacrifice in the pursuit of making someone else suffer. And that's not a wedding story. That's a redemption story. If you liked it, hit subscribe and check out more stories down below. And if you've got a story of your own, drop it in the comments. I read every single one. You matter.